Happy Black History Month 2026. Usually when we talk about Black history, we focus on Dr. King, or maybe Malcolm X, or maybe Rosa Parks. But there are a lot of other heroes and sheroes we usually don't get around to. And I want to talk about some of them.
Van Jones on Substack.
I named the first organization I ever started after an unsung Black heroine named Ella Jo Baker. Ella Jo Baker basically is responsible for almost everything cool in the 60s because she broke away from Dr. King to help young people start something called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. SNCC is an amazing organization because it was all the young people, it was the students. It wasn't the preachers, it wasn't the politicians, it wasn't the business people, it was a new force. But the question is, how did Ella Baker wind up in a position, because she was an older lady, to unleash this youth hurricane on the country? Well, she's actually a very well-trained organizer. She had been an organizer with the NAACP. She was from the North. She understood labor politics. But when a young guy named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. burst onto the national scene, he needed help. Dr. King, the reason you call him Martin Luther King Jr. is because his father was already famous. His father was already a very well-known pastor in Atlanta. And in fact, Dr. King had fled to Montgomery, where he could have a little bit of peace and quiet and be able to set his own course. So when Dr. King winds up in Montgomery, Alabama, and organizers there, including Rosa Parks, pull off this bus boycott, he winds up as a young guy as a spokesperson for a movement that he did not have to build himself. Women in the South, Black women, had already laid the infrastructure for the boycott. They needed a young person to be a spokesperson. Dr. King took on that role. But after this incredible victory of the Montgomery bus boycott, now you've got this young guy, young father, famous dad, but he didn't have to organize that boycott. He got a chance to lead it, but how is he going to organize himself? And he found Ella Jo Baker, who was an organizer's organizer. And she helped him and other young pastors, including Andy Young and others, to create something called this SCLC. That became Dr. King's vehicle. And Ella Jo Baker was the person who was behind that, making it work, making it happen. But Ella Jo Baker started to get frustrated with Dr. King. Here's this young guy, and in those days, sexism was a huge deal. And these young pastors thought they knew everything, and she was getting increasingly frustrated. And so when on February 1st, 1960, when young people started spontaneously doing these sit-ins at lunch counters, demanding to be served at lunch counters, demanding to get a sandwich, demanding to get a drink, and then were being arrested, beaten up, Ella Jo Baker saw something that she thought was incredibly important. There was a new force on the scene, and that this new generation of young people who a few years earlier had seen their own peer, Emmett Till, murdered and lynched, and his pictures shown all across the country. When Emmett Till's peers hit the campuses, they were a different generation of young Black folks, and they were not going to be held back. And so in some combination or conversation with Dr. King, Ella Jo Baker shows up at the first gathering of all these young people who had been doing all these sit-ins all across the South. And Ella Jo Baker did something that was possibly disloyal to Dr. King, but was very important for the country. She said, do not join any existing organization. Don't become the youth wing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference or the NAACP or any other group. Be your own force. And she said, what we don't need is any more leader-centered movements. We need movement-centered leaders. You should become movement-centered leaders. You should be trying to advance the cause, supporting other young people, supporting people who are not involved to get involved. Don't join a leader-centered movement. Become movement-centered leaders. Who was listening to Ella Jo Baker when she's talking? Oh, just somebody named John Lewis was a kid from Nashville listening. Diane Nash, another kid from Nashville listening. If you go through the list of people who came through SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You find Stokely Carmichael, you find hero after hero, Shero after Shero. Why? Because she, as an older person, was wise enough to say, let the young people go their own way. Let them come up with new tactics, with new slogans, with new ideas. And in some ways, she unleashes the entire youth revolution that changed the 60s, but it was done by an older African-American woman named Ella Jo Baker. So I named my first organization the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights after her. Not after my beloved Dr. King, not after my beloved Nelson Mandela, not after any of my beloved heroes, but after Ella Jo Baker, because she was an unsung heroine, a leader that helped other leaders lead, and we need more leaders like her. January 1st, 1996, 30 years ago, I hate to admit, Diana Frappier and Mike McClune and myself, all young lawyers, opened the doors of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. The door was actually a closet door because we were just leasing the back storage closet of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, a very august civil rights organization. It was led by a woman named Eva Jefferson Patterson, a legend in California civil rights. And I convinced her to give me the back storage closet. And we took a cardboard table, we put it in there. We took a Macintosh SE30, and we literally had, because it was literally a closet, and there's no plugs in a closet, we had to move the ceiling tiles, throw an extension cord over the wall into the next office, and that was my office for 3 years. But the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights was a very special organization because we took our inspiration from Ella Baker herself. What did Ella Baker do that was so special and so remarkable? She didn't focus on the rich and famous. She didn't focus on the biggest pastors of the day, the celebrities of the day. She focused on students and sharecroppers. She focused on the people who were the most marginal. In those days, the category of teenager had been barely invented. Young people were not taken seriously any place. And she set out to change that by empowering new voices to take strong action. And so we decided we were going to do something very similar. So we had something called the Bay Area Police Watch, where we were building a relational computer database so we could sue police officers who were engaged in problem practices. But when we got that information, we decided not to just go into court and talk to judges about it. We decided we also wanted to go into the court of public opinion. We went to city council meetings with the information we were gathering about bad cops. We went to the board of supervisors. We went to the police commission. We would go into these arenas where there were big, powerful people, and we would bring the facts. We would also bring young people who were going to Mission High School, who were going to Castlemont High School, who were experiencing a lot of racist mistreatment and rough behavior from police officers that didn't respect young Black, brown, and Filipino kids. We organized the kids themselves, and we would take them down to City Hall, and we would rally outside City Hall, and we would get them excited about going to speak truth to power. And then we would fill up the seats right before the commission meeting would start. And we knew we had a right under the Sunshine Law to address those commissions. And we would stand those young people up, and they would be a line going out the back of the hearing room often, and each young person would come up and tell their story. Sometimes they would read a poem, sometimes they would rap, up from the pavement, out of our enslavement, but why the cops gotta act like cavemen? And it became this sort of sensation in local politics of who are all these well-organized young kids coming down here with the facts, with the law, with data, and with style, and with passion. The local TV stations started to come down covering it. The newspaper started to cover it. It was almost an expectation after a while. If there's any major event that would happen, a Bay Area Police Watch would show up with what we call the Third Eye Movement, which is our group of young people. And I got that inspiration from Ella Baker. I got that idea that even if the big people won't listen, that young people can make grown people listen. Even if the system doesn't want to respond, if you get enough young people involved, enough of their energy, their passion, their honesty, their fearlessness, you can move the whole system. So we were able to, in the 1990s, change the San Francisco Police Department, the way that did policing, change the way that it did oversight. We were able to force them to fire a horrible police officer that had been causing mayhem in the community. And we did that all using the tactics that Ella Jo Baker had encouraged young people to use 30 years prior. I think we have a lot of unsung heroines. I think a lot of times the women are the ones who are coming up with all these brilliant ideas and strategies and making things work. And then some guy like myself will get up and give a speech and get all the credit. But the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights is still around 30 years later. It's gone through a couple different executive directors, a couple different programs. But at the heart of the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights is still this idea that everyday people who are directly impacted by unjust systems are the best champions to change things that are going wrong. And I'm just so grateful that the Ella Baker Center is still around and that the legacy of Ella Jo Baker lives on.
Van Jones on Substack.